The key thing to be this location independent person is you have to have location independent income, right? So you need to have the type of income that allows you to be location independent. With that said, now we have to look at that income source. How do you get paid? At the very base level, how do you get paid? How does that client put money into your pocket? Do you get paid merchant processing? Do you get paid to the bank transfer? Do you get paid in crypto? How physically does money get into your pocket to support your lifestyle? How you get paid dramatically impacts where you can register your business and how your business gets registered.
Hi, I'm Mickelle Weber, founder of House of Peregrine. This show is for life abroad and those crafting their life story with intention. I bring you conversations about international finances, meaning making, relationships, and parenting. I bring on the experts that help you on your journey so that you can connect more deeply with yourself, the people around you, and the place you currently call home. Find out more at houseofperegrine.com, where you can find exclusive guides, products, software, and a community that's waiting to welcome you. Welcome to House of Peregrine. Freedom isn't just location, it's structure, and today's guest knows the difference. Today we're joined by Bobby Casey, founder of BusinessAnywhere.io, built to help entrepreneurs start and run companies seamlessly wherever in the world they happen to land. Bobby brings a rare blend of lived experience and hard-earned clarity. Having lived in 10 countries, he understands the quiet friction points of international life, the paperwork, the timelines, the compliance, the moments where one missed deadline becomes an expensive detour. He's been building businesses since he was 19, across industries from real estate and restaurants to consulting, and that long view has shaped a philosophy that's both global and grounded. BusinessAnywhere.io was created to remove the administrative drag, especially around ongoing filings and renewals, so founders can travel lighter, operate smarter, and focus on what they're here to build. Bobby is known for being direct, practical, and refreshingly unsentimental about systems. So today we're going to talk about what it really takes to structure life and business across borders with less risk and more ease. Welcome, Bobby. Thank you so much for joining us on the House of Peregrine podcast. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you and speak to your audience.
Awesome. So I want to start out by telling people 10 countries is a lot of countries. That's an amazing amount. Can you tell me quickly what it is that you're up to and maybe the first country you landed in?
Okay, sure. So I've always been entrepreneurial and adventurous. I've always liked to travel a lot. I mean, I think the travel bug hit me pretty hard when I was 12 years old. And I had a social studies teacher in high school who really talked about how travel is important, experiencing different cultures, different languages, different people, and that sort of thing. And she organized a European trip over our spring break when I was, I guess, 12 years old. That would have been what, sixth grade, seventh grade, something like that. And it just hit me hard. Like, I'm like, this is kind of what I want. And so, I continued. I had a few different businesses. I'm originally from North Carolina and normal stuff. I had a business, worked locally. I actually, my first, or technically, I guess my third real business, we did actually spread across the US. We covered about, we were a service company. We covered about 2/3 of the zip codes. So I was traveling a lot in the US, but not too much travel internationally because I was so busy with work. And I ran that company for 12 or 13 years and decided to sell it. And I decided at that point, I just kind of reevaluated my life, what I wanted to do in business, what I wanted to do, like lifestyle, where I wanted to live, that sort of thing. And I thought, let's move abroad. So at the time, I was married, had 3 kids, and we said, look, I'm working online now. I was doing some trading, doing some consulting online. We've got the freedom, so let's give it a shot. And I moved with the family. We moved to Estonia, just kind of on a whim. This was back in 2009, I guess. And we just moved to Estonia on a whim. And to be honest, probably 2 years before that, I don't think I even had heard of Estonia, but I have an undergraduate degree in Russian language, and I thought it would be interesting to go to a place where I could practice speaking more Russian, which, sidebar, I learned really quickly living in Estonia is a terrible place to practice speaking Russian because Estonians do not want to speak to you in Russian, especially if you speak English. But yeah, just moved on a whim, went there. Initially, it was supposed to be 6 months. We extended it to a year. Decided we liked living abroad, but we still had our house and cars and stuff in North Carolina. moved back to North Carolina just to kind of prepare everything and sell everything. And then a few months later, we moved to Latvia in 2011. From there, it just kind of expanded, started traveling a lot in Europe, just to, we're close, short, quick, easy flights, traveling a lot, and just kind of spread from there. And then I just kind of lived in a lot of different places over the past, 17 years. So funny story. I remember I bought a house in 2004 in North Carolina. Had a beautiful house in a beautiful neighborhood at the end of a cul-de-sac in the countryside. Big 5-bedroom house, huge garage. I had a lot of motorcycles, stuff like that. And I remember telling my kids at that point, I'm never leaving this house. I will never ever move. When I die, just bury me in the backyard. Like I'm never ever ever leaving this house. And so, you know, the whole thing with never
Never,
evers, when you
never.
say, yeah, exactly. That's my whole thing now with never evers. If you say I'm never ever doing something, something in your brain says, wait a second, maybe I should think more about that thing. And, then you end up doing it. So, yeah, since then, I've lived in, I guess, 10 different countries. I've legally immigrated, like actually gone through the process to get residency in, I think, 6 or 7 countries. And I've traveled to probably, I don't know, around 80 or so countries, just traveling around.
It's amazing. And so it makes sense that you now are working with entrepreneurs. Tell me the unique challenges that entrepreneurs who are either digital nomads or are living globally, what do you see? Like well, first of all, why do you work with them? You are an entrepreneur yourself. So is that why, or is there something more?
So, it's a little bit of a longer backstory, but basically, I had a company before. The company I had in my 20s into my early 30s, and my clients were like big, big corporate retailers in the U.S. Like our clients were like Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, uh, Sears, Sports Authority, Dick's Sporting Goods, like huge big box chain retailers. And I realized, actually, one of the things I realized running that company is I hated it. I hated my clients. I hated dealing with corporate people. I hated the bureaucracy. I hated the red tape and all that stuff. And so, like, as in our offline chat, I discussed a little bit that I've had like a lot of things going on business wise and assets, and I hired a consultant like me to help me with my structure and tax optimization and all that stuff. And I enjoyed the process working with him so much. I went to some of my friends, and all my friends at that point were entrepreneurs. I didn't know anybody that had a job. And I went to my entrepreneur friends and said, hey, why don't we help you do the same thing I did? And then I worked together with the guy I hired to help them. And that was kind of the beginning of my consulting process, helping clients, with their asset protection and tax optimization and international strategies. And it just kind of evolved from there. And so then I became more and more international in my perspective, which means then I knew more and more people that were international in their perspective. And it just kind of evolved over time. But the challenges are complicated, really. For a big multinational company doing business in multiple countries, I mean, it's challenging too, but you have big firms that deal with that. You have like PwC and Anderson and the big, consulting firms that deal with that. But if you're a small business owner, maybe you're a Canadian with an e-commerce business selling in North America, and you live in Thailand, and your business does $1 million or $2 million a year in revenue, you can't go to like PwC. They're kind of out of reach for that small business person to go to them. And there wasn't really anybody helping the small business people on like deal with international and cross country issues because it was such a small niche. Like if you look back, I think it was around 2005 was when Skype was invented. Well, prior to 2005, it was difficult to be a digital nomad, right? I mean, it was very difficult because if you had clients, you could easily have $1,000 or $2,000 phone bill when you're talking to your clients, right? And then Skype came along and opened up channels of communication and allowed you to talk to your clients like cheaply or in many cases completely free. And it just kind of opened up a world of opportunity of communication for small business owners to do those things in a really efficient way. And then, of course, we had around that same time, we had Tim Ferriss's book, 4 Hour Work Week, that came out, and everybody in this space read it and thought, I'm going to go like work remotely and travel the world.
That's kind of when I was kind of a digital nomad in the early 2000s, and so it hasn't been that long, is your point, that people could do this, and so
Right,
policy, tax laws, tax firms are still springing up or non-existent in the niches that need them.
right. Exactly. Because it's only the past 20 years or so has this really been kind of a thing where, like, if you go back into the 90s, nobody talked about how, hey, I'm going to go live in Thailand for 2 months and work remotely, and then I'm going to go live in Mexico for 3 months and work remotely. No, like, nobody talked about that because it didn't really exist. I mean, not completely. I mean, maybe in a very minimal way it existed, but we didn't have the technology tools to make it so easy like it is now.
Yep,
But now that it's so
yep.
easy, you got so many people that want to live that way, but now you have a lot of different complications with the friction of being between countries. You have conflict of laws situations. Using my example, you're a Canadian with an e-commerce business selling in North America, living in Thailand. What do you do? You're Canadian. Do you register your company in Canada? Do you leave Canada? Do you maintain tax residency in Canada? Do you register your business in the US because you're selling in North America? Do you register it in Thailand because you're living in Thailand? Do you register it somewhere else? You know, how do you file your taxes? Where do you pay your taxes? Like, where do you even do your banking? How do you do payment processing? And these are complex issues that small business people don't really have, like, they can't go to that PwC to get these things sorted out because they don't, they're not doing $1 billion a year in revenue, like a Google or an Amazon or something like that. They don't have the resources for that. So a lot of the complications I see are just, how do I do this? And what I found is the vast majority of people in this space, they do what they know. So you're Canadian with a business in North America, living in Thailand. The only thing you really know is Canada. So what most people do in this space is they register a Canadian company and they maintain tax residency in Canada, and they just kind of go with that. And it works. It's not that that doesn't work, but there are much better solutions than that, but it is a doable thing.
Yeah. Maybe this is a good time to go over just a couple of um, definitions, if you will. So there's
Sure.
tax residency, physical residency. There's a few things. So maybe give us some of those, because they don't all have to be the same country, which is
That's
what we're
correct.
used to. So tell us the difference just quickly.
Yep. And very often it's better to, I call it geo arbitrage. Some people call it the multi-flag approach, or what's the thing, six flag approach or whatever. But yeah, so physical residency gives you the rights to reside in a country. So that's handled through the migration office in that country. That would be like if you have a residence permit or a visa to spend time in that country. That only gives you the rights to reside in that country, and you have to kind of hit a checklist of things that allows you to qualify for that residence permit or that visa. But that's only your rights to reside. Tax residency is something completely different. I mean, it's not even managed by the same government agency. It's managed by the tax office in that country. And you can become a like, there's a lot of examples here, but like in the US, for example, you can be a tax resident without having any legal residency, like without having a green card or any, like an E2 visa or anything like that. You can be a tax resident without having any legal rights to reside in the country. The flip side, you can also have legal rights to reside in the country, like an E2 visa, for example, without actually having tax residency. Basically, a lot of countries are like that. There can be some overlap between tax residency and physical residency, but not always. The example I like to give is Portugal. So Portugal, if you have, it depends on the type of visa you have. Depends on if you have overlap. So if you have, what is it, the D7 in Portugal, if you're residing in Portugal on a D7 visa, so that would be, a D7 is for somebody who's not a European Union national. So anyone from outside the EU, like anywhere, Canadian, American, Chinese, it doesn't matter. They can apply for a D7, giving them rights to reside in Portugal. However, a D7 visa has a minimum stay requirement in the country of 183 days, which by default makes you a tax resident in Portugal. So that's an example where that particular visa makes you a tax resident because of the requirements of that visa. However, a D8 visa, which is the digital nomad visa, does not make you a tax resident because there's not a minimum stay requirement for you to be in the country. You do have a minimum income, like a minimum income restriction to qualify for the D8, but it doesn't necessarily make you a tax resident because you can have a D8 visa in Portugal and not fulfill the things the tax office requires you to be considered a tax resident. There's a lot of different
Got it.
examples like that. And so that's a way like digital nomads kind of arbitrage between countries without they can have residency somewhere but not be a tax resident and stay out of the tax trap, and they can basically, I mean, it's niche and there could be some compromise, but it is possible for a digital nomad to have zero tax residency and pay no tax anywhere at the personal level.
Yep. And to do that, you have to kind of be willing to count days, be strategic about where you're landing when. Do you
Yeah, of
help
course.
people with that? Yeah,
We
okay.
do.
And so,
Yeah.
so if someone came to you and said, I really want to live abroad. I really want to optimize. I don't have kids in school. I'm not settling somewhere. I love these climates or these countries. Do you help them come up with a plan to optimize for these sorts of things?
We do. Yeah, we do. But we work kind of in reverse of that. So we kind of start at the reverse side of that because, and I'll reference back to the 4-Hour Workweek book that's like 20 years old now. The key thing to be this location independent person is you have to have location independent income, right?
Mhm.
If you're a plumber in Montreal, Canada, well, that's not really location independent income, right? Like it's not practical for you to go live 3 months in Thailand and 6 months in Mexico and 2 months in Croatia if you're a plumber in Montreal. So you need to have the type of income that allows you to be location independent. So with that said, now we have to look at that income source. Number one, how do you get paid? At the very base level, how do you get paid? Meaning, how does that client put money into your pocket? Do you get paid merchant processing, like credit card payments? Do you get paid to the bank transfer? Do you get paid in crypto? Are you paid in cash? How physically does money get into your pocket to support your lifestyle? From that point, we look at how you get paid dramatically impacts where you can register your business and how your business gets registered. So, for example, if you use Stripe to get paid, the first thing you need to do is you need to look on the Stripe website on their terms of service and see where they accept clients. So you need to know where you can register a company so that you can have Stripe. And basically nowadays with all your financial matters, payment processing, banking, and your company registration all need to be in the same country. So for example, let's say you want to open a Stripe account in, I don't know, the UK, and you want to register a company in Singapore with a bank account in Singapore. Well, you can't do that. You have to have everything fully aligned, right? So people say, oh, maybe I should register a company in like Belize because there's zero tax, but then I'll open a bank account in the US with a Stripe account. Well, you can't do that because the banks in the US won't open a bank account for a Belizean company. So you have to have kind of the financial piece aligned first. So to your point, do I work with clients to help them find that solution? Yes, but we got to look at how you get paid, where to register your company first. And a lot of people are like, well, I'm a freelancer. I don't need to have a company registered. Well, actually, in most cases, yes, you do, because if you don't, then most likely you're going to be subject to the taxation, your home country, because having, let's say you're Canadian and you say, I don't want to register a company. I'll just get paid into my Canadian bank account. That's going to be Canadian source income, which is going to kind of keep the CRA, the Canadian Revenue Authority, their hooks kind of attached to you. You're still going to be a tax resident in Canada in that way. So you would need to register a company in a tax optimized way so you're not being still connected to your home country. If, of course, you're trying to optimize for taxes. So yeah, it's a long process you've got to do. How you get paid, then we look at where do you register your company, your banking, your payment processing, and then we look at how that company is treated based on the nature of your income. Is it a virtual business? Do you sell software? Do you sell physical goods? Do you do events? There's a lot of different variables that go into the nature of the income itself. For example, you can register a company in the US. Let's say you're German with a software company and you're living in Mexico. Well, a US company might be perfect for you if you do a US LLC because it's a pass through and the entity itself doesn't physically operate in the US. And from a US perspective, you only pay tax on what they call US source income. So, like that example, German software company living in Mexico, a US LLC, like a Wyoming LLC, would be perfect because they would basically pay zero tax anywhere in a scenario like that.
Yeah.
But you have to look at each
Yeah,
individual
cool.
situation.
Yeah. And so that's actually kind of the definition of being an entrepreneur in general is you're usually an exception. And when you're traveling or when you're moving abroad, it makes it even more
It just adds more
overhead,
layers of
more
complexity.
everything. Yeah. And there isn't really a roadmap. So for me, it feels like the Wild West of when you're getting advice or when you're even Googling, you can get 10 different answers to the same question. May all be right, depending on like some countries. But what are the mistakes, the big mistakes you see entrepreneurs making?
So the first mistake is Googling that question because I've seen this so many times. I'm a little bit joking, just responding to you, but very often
Yeah, of
people
course.
will go on like a Facebook group or something like that, or they'll go on a forum or they'll ask their friends and they'll say, "Hey, I'm thinking about moving abroad. German, I've got a software business. I'm thinking about moving abroad and what's the best thing I should do to register my business and how and where or if I should pay taxes and I'm German software company living in Thailand, what should I do?" And so one of the biggest mistakes I see is asking that question kind of out to Google or ChatGPT or Perplexity or a Facebook forum or a Facebook group or something like that. And what's going to happen is, like you said, you can ask that question and get 10 different answers. It doesn't necessarily mean something is wrong, or maybe there is. Some of them could actually be completely wrong,
Yeah.
but some of them could
Yep.
be right, but they don't know all the minutia of the details of your situation. Like you might one detail. Yeah, by the way, I've got kids in school, right? Like that makes that's a huge difference. Or my spouse is from Argentina, right? Like that can make a huge difference on the way we structure the business because sometimes we can use spouses, like one spouse maybe because of their nationality has a better situation than the other. So we might use that spouse to move some of the income into the spouse instead of you to optimize for taxation. And if we don't know every single one of those details, it's very hard to give a very clear answer. So the thing I see as a big issue is people go online and they want the answer, they don't want to pay for it because they don't want professional advice. So they say, I'm going to go to a Facebook group and ask the question. And somebody gives them the answer. Like they say, using the example, German software company living in Thailand, they say, oh, you need to register a Dubai company and that's it. That's your perfect solution. And the big mistake is them taking that answer and doing that without going to a professional who walks them through all the little details of their own personal situation because the advice they got on that Facebook group might have been right for the person who gave the advice, but everyone has slightly different situation or vastly different situation. It could also be that that person that gave you advice is completely wrong and creating a problem for themselves and they just don't know it yet. And there's so many variables there. So I think like if you're somebody who wants to do this research yourself, that's great. Go do the research. Write it down. Write down all the different options you get when you find those different solutions. Like they say you should register a Dubai company, or you should go get Estonian e-residency and register your company in Estonia, or you should do a Delaware LLC, or you should do a Cayman Islands a limited company, or whatever. Write down all of these different options you get on your research, but Go hire the professional that's been through this 1,000 times and ask, like, what do you think about Dubai? What do you think about the Delaware LLC? What do you think about this? And let's go through each one to see which one more closely suits your situation. So that's a big mistake. Another big mistake people make is not understanding how law works. Law is not objective, full stop. So people want a black and white answer when it comes to things like tax law. Well, there is no black and white answer. Get over it. Get used to it. It's funny too, because every time, like, I have clients in probably 100 countries, and the two nationalities that have the hardest time with that answer are Germans and Canadians. They just can't stand not having black and white answers. They can't do it. Their brains just don't function that way. It's just the way they're brought up. But you've got to understand the way law works. You don't get objective answers when it comes to law. Law literally is the subjective interpretation of laws, statutes, regulations, all these certain things. That's literally what law is a subjective interpretation of these things. And so everybody has a little bit different situation. You can't always get a black and white answer. And the more variables you input into that situation, less objective you can be. And like we talked about, if you have multiple countries involved, you're the German living in Thailand with a company selling all over the world, and you maybe register a company in using that previous example in the US or something like that. You just have 3 countries involved now: Germany, the US, Thailand.
Yep.
You just injected 3 different variables in there. And so there can be, and there will be, like, conflicts between the legal systems of 3 different countries. So the one thing people need to really understand is, on a gray scale, when I talk about doing things gray area, 0 being completely white, 10 being completely black. Obviously, you don't want to be completely black in your planning, but you're never going to get to 0 when you have all these variables in place. You're going to have to come to terms with some things being a little bit gray. Like, if you can be under like a 4 on the gray scale, you're doing really good, actually. Like a 3 or a 4, obviously I'm giving a measurement to something that's not exactly measurable, but like the less complications you can get to, but you're still never getting to 0 when you have all these different variables in play. So the thing you've really got to understand, the mistake people make, is getting advice from somebody and saying, oh, well, that's not a black and white answer. Let's talk to somebody else or something like that. You just got to come to terms with, you're going to be doing a little bit of gray area stuff when you're, living outside your home country, running a business. Actually, running a business in general is a little bit gray area, right? I mean,
Yeah, it's true. And I think entrepreneurs may be a little bit more used to it. And
yeah,
I know when we moved here, my partner was part of a company, and he definitely was more comfortable with that gray area, not because you don't want to, but it's almost, and I had another interview with someone about visas, and they said it's actually almost impossible to be in compliance. People don't realize that. And so, like you said, it's really important that you understand that, do your best, use professionals, and also document everything. Document everything you
yeah,
can.
that's a
Um,
good point.
and so do you work exclusively with entrepreneurs, and you talked a little bit about like geo arbitrage, Six Flag approach. These are mostly for people who are able to move around, right? So these are not for people like me who have 3 kids in school. Is that who you mostly advise and work with, or people who are traveling?
So I work with entrepreneurs. Also, I have a lot of freelancer clients, like high income freelancers, and then also investors who have assets. But very often the investors I work with are, let's say they had a business, they sold it, now they got a bunch of money and they are investing in something, real estate or other businesses or that type of thing. So freelancers, high income freelancers, entrepreneurs, and investors. And predominantly it is people who either live outside their home country or they have business or assets outside their home country. So, like, I have a lot of clients that are, let's say, the more traditional expats, but expats is a little bit more complicated. So, like you, for example, in your situation, you're an American living in the Netherlands. You have tax residency in the Netherlands. Like, you are settled, you get the kids in school, You've got the house in the suburbs, white picket fence and all that stuff. I don't know if you have a white picket fence, but you get my point.
I live in the center of Amsterdam. No white
Yep.
picket fence. But interestingly, I didn't know I also had tax residency in Utah. So that was a big mistake we made, is we weren't careful about planning for tax residency in Utah.
So that's a good point, particularly for Americans. If you're going to leave the US and go live in another country, you need to consider the state you're leaving from. Some countries are much more aggressive than others when it comes to holding on to you as a tax resident. California being the biggest example, California and New York being the two biggest examples. If you're from California or New York and you want to move to, we'll just use Mexico as an example, and then as an American, you can qualify for what's called the foreign earned income exclusion. There's two different ways to do it. I'm sure you're probably aware of it. There's two different ways to do it. There's the physical presence test, and then there's the bona fide residency test. There's also the foreign tax credits if you're paying tax in the other country. So there are loopholes for you to minimize tax, but that's only at the federal level. So if you're a California resident moving to Mexico, even if you qualify for the foreign earned income exclusion, California hasn't let you go because you still have an address in California, a driver's license in California, your voter registration in California. Maybe you still have a property in California. Maybe you got bank accounts in California. And California doesn't care where you go to sleep at night. They care about what it looks like as far as your connection to their state. So if it looks like you have more connection, they still consider you a tax resident. So at the federal level, you might get the foreign earned income exclusion, but not at the state level. So you have to do some things at the state level to make sure you exit. The easiest way to go about that usually is to move. I use air quotes here because maybe you don't actually move, but to move to a zero tax state like South Dakota or Wyoming or Florida or Nevada or something like that. And what you want to do is you want to have a legal address in that state. You want to move all of your mailing to that state. You want to move your driver's license to that state. If you're a voter, you want to move your voter registration to that state. Basically, you want to move everything out of California that has a let's say a public record database connection that links you back to California, because the California Department of Revenue, all they need to do is look in things like your DMV database, for example, or any like housing databases if you still own property in California, or look in like credit reports, because when the credit agencies in the US report your credit, they also report your address associated with that credit account. So if you have a credit card with Chase and you got a California address, when they submit your update every month to the credit reporting agencies, that California address is going to populate in your credit report, and the California Department of Revenue can see that. If you change your address to, let's say, Wyoming on your credit card accounts, the next time they update that information, it'll populate in your credit report with a Wyoming address instead of California. And then if California looks it up, they don't see any connection to California. So it's important to fully disconnect from, depending on your state. Like some states are not super aggressive. Zero tax states, of course, they don't care because they don't tax you anyway. But some of them are hyper aggressive.
Yeah. So what you're saying is it's really important to be strategic. And you and I both moved on a whim, as you said. And so that's something, so someone like you might be someone's first call if they're thinking of moving abroad, how to be strategic with as much notice as possible so that you can be a little bit more strategic and just avoid paying way more than you have to or having nasty surprises. But also, I think it is a bit like a puzzle. It's a bit like an investigation, and there's so much to know about the different countries, especially if you want to travel. A lot of people are now wanting to homeschool their kids and travel country to country throughout the year and maybe not have a home base.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really beautiful and can be optimized for taxes and also tax burdens. And so you help people with that as well, I think.
Yeah, so to your point, sometimes I am the first person they call. From the consulting side, not from the Business Anywhere side, but from the consulting side, my global wealth protection company. Sometimes I am the first person they call because they're referred by a friend who's done a similar thing. Somebody says, hey, Tom, you moved to Costa Rica. how did you go about that? And Tom says, hey, you got to talk to this Bobby guy. He can help you with that. So in some cases, yeah, I'm the first person. More frequently, I am not the first person. I am the person people call when they have a major problem that needs to be fixed. Or they just realized, like I had a client a couple weeks ago before Christmas Canadian who had been living kind of nomadically for like 6 or 7 years. They made a lot of money. They were making net income over 7 figures every year, and they've been living abroad. And they had no idea that they could disconnect from Canada, from the tax system in Canada. They had no idea. And so somebody referred them to me. They have a good sized business, 7 figure business, but their net was a low 7 figures and completely virtual business. And it was kind of a gut wrenching call to find out they'd been paying like mid 6 figures in tax for 7 years when they didn't need to. We're talking about
Yeah.
roughly $3 million they'd paid in tax. It was completely unnecessary if they had properly structured their
Wow.
business from day one. So if I would have been their first call, they would have saved about 3 million in tax over the course of that, whatever it was, 6 or 7 year period that they remained. So remember, I said a lot of times most people, they don't know what they're doing, so they just stay connected in their home country. They keep the company registered in their home country. They stay a tax resident there, and then they become nomadic because they don't know what they don't know. So sometimes it's like that, or it can be, somebody had a problem with their business or their banking. They've got, they're German, not living in Germany, still running a GmbH in Germany. The bank finds out that they no longer live in Germany, so they restrict or freeze their bank accounts, and now they can't, their payment processing shuts down, and they've got a business that's doing really well, but now they can't get paid and they can't access their money because Germany says, well, you don't live here anymore, so you can't use our banking system, for example. So that type of thing happens, unfortunately, more frequently than you think. And then we've got to pivot like really, really quickly to try to get something up and running for people like that. But it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It never happens like overnight. So, so to your point, better to be strategic, plan ahead. If you know you're going to move, if you're planning to move abroad next year, or during the course of this year, don't, like, I have it all the time. People say, should I just wait until I move to do all this? I'm like, for God's sakes, no. My God, no. You do this like 6 to 12 months before you move if you want to do it correctly. Otherwise, we're going to have a whole different set of things to deal with if you wait till after you move. And there's even little logistical things that become difficult if you wait to do this after you move. Like little things like having it, I guarantee you've probably had to do this, but having to have certified copies of birth certificates and marriage certificates with an apostille, that's way easier to do when you're still in your home country than it is to jump through the hoops when you're 5,000 miles away. Like little things like that, getting your.
My husband had to fly home and get an apostille.
Yep, exactly. That's my point. So like little things like that, it's way easier to get that stuff done if you pre-plan it. Like I pre-planned this stuff because I knew about it, but most people don't. Like I still, like at least my youngest son now, because he's, still finishing high school, but like I have a copy of his birth certificate with an apostille in my backpack all the time, because if we're ever traveling, just me and him, I need to prove, like, and it's happened before. I've been traveling with just my son, and immigration at some country says, how do I know this is your son? And I'm like, well, looky here. Here's my paperwork. It happens.
Yep.
So doing that stuff pre-planning makes the most sense. Waiting till it's done, I mean, that's what most people do, to be honest. Like little things like your mailing address. Like our company, Business Anywhere, like just a quick thing, basically we do US company formations and basically everything for a business startup in the US. But one of the other things we do, it's solely because of my own need, is we have a virtual mailbox product that allows you to have a legal address in the US to receive your mail, where we scan and upload your mail. Well, what I found a lot of digital nomads do, they move and then they don't think. They're like, but I still have my mailing address. Oh, I need to change that mailing address. I don't live there anymore. Oh, okay. Let me call my cousin, my brother, my mom, my dad, my friend. I'll just use their mailing address to get all my mail and move it. Well, that might work for a little while, but eventually your brother is going to get really annoyed having to take pictures of your mail and email it to you all the time, and having to drive down to FedEx and FedEx you your updated credit card. They're going to get annoyed with that stuff. And also,
Shout out to my father-in-law who still does it after 9 years.
come on,
He's a saint.
father-in-law. Come on, father-in-law. That's because he loves you, right? But
yeah, he's amazing. That's true.
but having a
But
virtual
don't do
mailbox,
that. Don't be like me.
having a virtual mailbox, it just, come on, it's like $20 a month, and you can download, you can see your mail online, you can have it forwarded to you anywhere in the world, and it gives you a consistent address that allows you to deal with things like banking and payment processing and like bank accounts and credit cards and all those things, cell phone bills, whatever. But a lot of people, they don't deal with those things until it's a thing. You're like, oh, I gotta do some of this stuff. I mean, to be honest, like when I first moved abroad, I didn't know about it. I didn't know what a virtual mailbox was. I used my friend's address, and then I realized like I was annoying him because I would call him up and say, "Hey, buddy, can you take a picture of all my mail?" And I could feel a little bit of friction. He's like, "Yeah, sure, whatever, I can do it." And then I started researching, and I found a virtual mailbox provider. I started using them. And then this was a long time ago. I started referring clients to them. And that was when I was in the process, like later, I started Business Anywhere. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to start my own virtual mailbox company because there's a lot of things I didn't like about them. So that's, I saw the need. I'm in that marketplace. I'm in this world. So that's kind of how it got going.
Yeah, very cool, Bobby. Once an entrepreneur, always an entrepreneur. That's the way it goes. I love
That's
what you're
true.
up to. I know you have a hard stop, so I want you to tell people how to find you if they want to go over their strategy and they're an entrepreneur living outside their home country.
Sure. Well, the easiest way to get a hold of us is our website. It's businessanywhere.io. On that page, we have a contact page. You can actually go there, send us an email. You can even schedule like an intro call with one of our team members right there. We also have a chat thing on there. You can chat with us. And that's for businessanywhere.io. That's our kind of our startup platform. I'll just mention it briefly, but my consulting website for people that are more like need more hands-on, like ongoing support for consulting. Most of my like entrepreneur clients, we do 4, 5, 6 consultations to help them get sorted, and then usually like a catch-up call once or twice a year if there's any changes. That website is globalwealthprotection.com.
And any socials we should know about?
Yeah, I'm on all of them. The easiest one, which you're gonna laugh when I say this, but I have a link tree. It's my handle on the link tree, which has connection to all of our socials. My handle on the link tree is Tax Jesus.
Nice. It probably is true, actually, especially if people are coming to you when they're in trouble. No, well, thank you so much for joining us. I will put everything in the show notes, and I thank you for sharing all your perspectives today. I love what you're up to, and I really think that our community is going to really use your resources really well. So reach out to Bobby if you need Tax Jesus, and thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Bobby, for joining me today. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks for having me on. Take care.
Okay, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed our show. For the latest insights on living internationally, join us at houseofperegrine.com to find out how you can connect with our community. Let's craft our life story with intention together.